Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The content provided in this video is strictly for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute formal legal, financial, psychological, or professional family counseling advice. Divorce mediation, family law, and the social sciences surrounding marital dissolution involve highly complex, jurisdiction-specific regulations that vary significantly from one state to another across the United States. What we explore today are historical trends, sociological data, and psychological case studies designed to broaden your understanding of dispute resolution mechanisms. We are examining this topic through the lens of social science, analyzing human behavior, conflict resolution theories, and economic impacts. Any potential outcomes discussed are based on academic research and aggregate data, not individual predictions. You should never make life-altering legal or financial decisions based solely on a YouTube video. Always conduct your own exhaustive due diligence and consult with licensed attorneys, certified mediators, and qualified mental health professionals in your specific jurisdiction before taking any action regarding a separation or divorce. Imagine walking into a sterile, poorly lit room where two complete strangers, wearing black robes and formal suits, have the absolute authority to dissect your past, mandate your future, and redistribute the wealth you spent a lifetime building. For over 1 million Americans every single year, this is not a terrifying hypothetical scenario. It is the brutal, everyday reality of the traditional family court system. The United States currently holds one of the highest divorce rates in the industrialized world, with historical trends showing that roughly 40 to 50% of married couples eventually file for dissolution. But the truly shocking statistic is not the rate of divorce itself. It is the catastrophic financial and psychological collateral damage inflicted upon families by the adversarial litigation process. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this modern crisis. Consider a deeply researched historical case study, often mirrored in contemporary sociological research, involving a dual-income family residing in a major metropolitan area in California. After 15 years of marriage, they decided to separate. Believing they had to protect themselves, they chose the traditional litigation route, each hiring aggressive opposing counsel. Over the next 3 years, they engaged in a relentless, exhausting legal war of attrition. By the time the judge finally struck the gavel to issue the final decree, the couple had spent a combined $250,000 in legal fees. This financial hemorrhage effectively liquidated their children's hard-earned college funds and forced the emergency sale of their primary residence at a massive market loss. Furthermore, the longitudinal social science data measuring the impact on their children revealed severe, sustained spikes in anxiety and a complete breakdown of healthy co-parenting communication. They fought tirelessly to win their respective cases, but in the end, the systemic friction ensured that both of them lost almost everything that actually mattered to their future stability. Now, contrast that devastating outcome with a parallel case study originating out of the Midwest. A demographically similar couple, facing the exact same complex asset division, real estate valuations, and intricate child custody dilemmas, opted for a completely different structural framework, divorce mediation. Within 6 months, for a mere fraction of the cost, they dissolved their marriage privately. They retained total control over their financial assets, protected their children from the trauma of open court battles, and successfully preserved a functional, respectful co-parenting relationship. How did the second couple bypass the almost guaranteed destruction of the traditional system? What specific psychological boundaries and behavioral negotiation tactics did they utilize that the first couple completely ignored? And why do traditional family law structures and cultural norms in the United States often heavily disincentivize this highly efficient, peaceful alternative? The answers to these vital questions do not lie in legal statutes alone. They lie hidden deep within the academic disciplines of social science, behavioral economics, and the psychology of mediation. The traditional court system is structurally designed for adversarial combat. It relies on a concept known in sociology as adversarial legalism, pitting two parties against each other in a strictly zero-sum game where one person's gain is mathematically and legally tied to the other person's loss. Mediation, however, operates on an entirely different sociological and psychological paradigm. It flips the script from aggressive positional bargaining to collaborative, interest-based negotiation. But there is a massive catch that most people never realize until it is too late. Mediation is not a magic wand. If you enter the mediation room fundamentally misunderstanding the psychological dynamics, power imbalances, and behavioral economics at play, You can be outmaneuvered, emotionally manipulated, and legally outnegotiated just as severely as you would be in a courtroom. We are about to open the vault on the empirical data, the hidden psychological frameworks, and the exact systemic shifts that occur behind the closed doors of a professional mediation session. You are going to discover the precise sociological reasons why some mediations result in extraordinary mutual success, while others collapse into bitter, expensive failures. This brings us to the core promise and purpose of today's deep dive masterclass. By the time you finish watching this comprehensive educational breakdown, you will possess a profound, academically grounded understanding of divorce mediation as a complex social science phenomenon. We are going to deconstruct the entire mediation ecosystem for the U.S. audience, solving the critical problem of the unknown that plagues divorcing couples. For millions of Americans facing the terrifying, isolating prospect of family restructuring, the greatest enemy is a fundamental lack of specialized knowledge. The traditional legal system thrives on opacity, leaving the average citizen entirely reliant on highly paid gatekeepers to translate their own lives into legal jargon. We are systematically stripping away that opacity today. We will thoroughly explore the exact differences between litigated divorce and mediated dispute resolution, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but through the rigorous, evidence-based lens of psychological outcomes and long-term family sociology. You will learn about the foundational concept of self-determination, the primary pillar of mediation that returns the power of decision-making directly to the individuals whose lives are actually impacted, rather than surrendering that autonomy to an overburdened, unfamiliar state judge. We will analyze the specific historical trends and cultural shifts that led to the dramatic rise of alternative dispute resolution in the United States over the last 40 years, examining how an overwhelmed, painfully slow judicial system essentially forced the creation of this private, confidential alternative out of sheer necessity. Furthermore, we will break down the precise, highly specialized role of the mediator. They are not judges, they are not arbitrators, and they strictly do not have the power to force a legal settlement upon anyone. Instead, we will look at how they utilize advanced psychological principles, including active listening, cognitive reframing techniques, and emotional de-escalation strategies, to guide highly emotional, high-conflict individuals toward a mutually acceptable, enduring consensus. We will deeply explore the concept of a balanced power dynamic, diving into what happens sociologically when there is an inherent imbalance of power, such as in case studies involving historical financial control, coercive control, or emotional abuse. We will uncover exactly how social scientists and elite mediation professionals attempt to safeguard the fundamental integrity of the negotiation process in those highly sensitive, complex scenarios. You will understand the critical, often overlooked importance of a neutral environment, and how the physical and psychological setting of mediation actively alters human behavioral responses and cognitive flexibility during high-stakes negotiations. We will also dissect the chronological phases of a standard mediation process, from the initial pre-mediation consultation and psychological boundary setting, to the intensive information gathering phase, the grueling negotiation of complex assets like joint retirement accounts and real estate equity, and finally, the meticulous drafting of the Memorandum of Understanding. By thoroughly understanding these underlying sociological mechanics and psychological triggers, you are not just learning about a legal alternative, you are gaining a powerful, universal conceptual framework for high-stakes human interaction and conflict resolution. You will be fully equipped to recognize the subconscious behavioral traps that destroy negotiations, and you will master the communication strategies that foster cooperation, even in the most toxic, emotionally charged environments. This is not just about avoiding the financial ruin of court. It is about understanding the fundamental science of human conflict and mastering the art of resolution. We are going to leave no stone unturned, examining the hard data, the peer-reviewed sociological theories, and the real-world case studies that define modern American divorce mediation. Let us begin peeling back the layers of this fascinating social science. To truly grasp why mediation is radically altering the landscape of American family dissolution in 2026, we first have to examine the behavioral economics of conflict and the foundational theories of human interaction. When a couple enters a courtroom, they are structurally forced into what game theorists call a zero-sum game. In sociology and economics, a zero-sum game is a mathematical representation of a situation in which an advantage that is won by one of two sides is lost by the other. The entire legal apparatus in the United States is fundamentally built upon this adversarial framework. You have a plaintiff and a defendant, a winner and a loser. But applying this binary win-or-lose framework to the dissolution of a deeply enmeshed family unit creates a psychological and financial disaster. Let us ground this in a realistic scenario based on historical trends and potential outcomes for the current year. Imagine if a typical dual-income couple, David and Jessica from suburban Illinois, decide to end their marriage in 2026. Like many Americans today, their financial reality is complex. They share a mortgage with a fluctuating interest rate, 2 different 401k accounts, and joint credit card debt, all while trying to co-parent 2 young children. If David and Jessica choose traditional litigation, they will each hire an attorney. By design, those attorneys are legally and ethically bound to zealously advocate only for their individual client. This structural mandate instantly triggers a behavioral phenomenon known as positional bargaining. David stakes an extreme initial claim to protect himself. Jessica stakes an equally extreme counterclaim to protect herself. The massive gap between these 2 artificial positions immediately becomes a hostile battleground. Once David and Jessica enter this adversarial battleground, a highly destructive cognitive bias takes over. Social scientists refer to this as reactive devaluation. Reactive devaluation occurs when a negotiation proposal is automatically devalued or rejected simply because it appears to originate from an antagonist. Even if David eventually offers a perfectly fair, mathematically sound compromise regarding the division of their home equity, the deeply entrenched adversarial environment causes Jessica to view the offer with intense suspicion. Her brain subconsciously assumes that because David is offering it, there must be a hidden trap, and it must be bad for her. She rejects the fair offer. Her attorney files another expensive motion, and the financial bleeding continues. This psychological feedback loop is the precise mechanism that drains family wealth into the pockets of the legal system. The conflict becomes self-perpetuating, completely detached from the actual logistical needs of the family. This is where the paradigm shift of mediation enters the sociological spotlight. Instead of positional bargaining, mediation relies on a completely different framework called interest-based negotiation. This concept, extensively studied in academic dispute resolution programs, forces a radical shift in how humans approach conflict. In our scenario, a highly trained mediator steps into the room with David and Jessica. The mediator does not care about their extreme initial positions. The mediator is trained to dig underneath those positions to uncover the underlying human interests. Position is what you say you want. An interest is the underlying motivation, fear, or need that causes you to want it. For example, David might take the rigid position that he absolutely must have the family home. In a courtroom, the judge simply decides who gets the house. But in mediation, the professional strips back the layers. Through structured inquiry, the mediator discovers that David does not actually care about the physical house itself. His true underlying interest is simply maintaining geographical proximity to his children's current school district, so his daily routine is not disrupted. Jessica's underlying interest might be securing enough liquid capital to start a new business venture without taking on catastrophic debt. Once these underlying interests are exposed, the dispute is no longer a zero-sum game. It transitions into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. The mediator helps David and Jessica realize that they can sell the family home, providing Jessica with the liquid capital she desperately needs for her business, while utilizing a portion of the remaining equity to secure a smaller residence for David within the exact same school district. Both underlying interests are satisfied. The extreme positions are discarded. The family's wealth is preserved, and the emotional trauma is significantly mitigated. This brings us to a critical concept in the social psychology of mediation, known as self-determination theory. This theory suggests that humans are deeply driven by a need for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Traditional litigation strips individuals of all autonomy. A judge, a stranger in a robe who has known the family for perhaps 3 hours total, imposes a binding, inflexible ruling from above. The couple is forced to comply, which historical trends show leads to incredibly high rates of post-divorce litigation. When people feel a solution was forced upon them without their input, they subconsciously seek ways to undermine it. Mediation leverages self-determination theory to achieve the exact opposite outcome. Because David and Jessica actively built their own settlement, they feel a strong sense of psychological ownership over the final agreement. They understand the complex compromises that were made. They retain their autonomy. Sociological data and longitudinal case studies spanning the last 3 decades consistently demonstrate that mediated divorce settlements yield vastly higher long-term compliance rates than court-ordered mandates. People rarely rebel against rules they wrote themselves. They are significantly less likely to drag each other back into court years later over minor child support modifications or holiday scheduling disputes, because the foundational communication channels were preserved rather than destroyed. But this highly efficient, logical process completely hinges on the assumption that both individuals in the room possess the cognitive flexibility and the emotional stability to negotiate in good faith. What happens when the foundational requirement of balanced power is completely absent? What occurs inside the mediation room when one spouse has controlled every single financial account for 20 years, leaving the other completely in the dark about their true net worth? Or even more dangerously, how does a mediator handle a scenario where psychological manipulation, severe narcissism, or a history of coercive control is actively weaponized during the negotiation process? If a mediator fails to immediately identify and neutralize these toxic behavioral dynamics, mediation can quickly transform from a tool of empowerment into an incredibly dangerous weapon of psychological subjugation, leading to catastrophic financial outcomes for the vulnerable party. The methods professionals use to detect and dismantle these hidden traps are absolutely fascinating, and failing to understand them is the single biggest mistake you can make. To understand the invisible architecture of power within a dispute resolution setting, we must deeply analyze a foundational concept in behavioral economics known as information asymmetry. In any negotiation, information is the primary currency. When both parties hold roughly equal amounts of accurate, verifiable information, the negotiation can proceed logically. However, historical trends in traditional American marriages often reveal a stark division of labor, which inevitably breeds massive information asymmetry. One spouse often assumes the role of the primary financial manager, handling the investment portfolios, the tax filings, and the complex retirement vehicles, while the other spouse manages the domestic infrastructure, child rearing, or perhaps a separate career entirely detached from the family's aggregate wealth building. When dissolution occurs, this operational division suddenly transforms into a severe structural vulnerability. Imagine if we look at a highly relevant case study for the current year 2026. Consider Michael and Sarah, a couple living in a major technology hub like Seattle, Washington. Over a 20-year marriage, Michael, a senior software architect, managed all the family finances. His compensation packages were heavily weighted in complex restricted stock units, staggered equity vesting schedules, and decentralized cryptocurrency wallets. Sarah, an incredibly successful freelance graphic designer, contributed to the household income but entirely trusted Michael to manage the macro-level wealth. When they enter mediation, Michael possesses a complete, encyclopedic knowledge of their true net worth. Sarah possesses almost none. If a mediator is not highly trained in forensic financial sociology, Michael can easily weaponize this information asymmetry. He might casually present a spreadsheet that completely omits his secondary digital asset wallets, or he might intentionally undervalue the present-day worth of his unvested stock options. He will then attempt to rush the negotiation, using a psychological tactic known as anchoring. Anchoring is a cognitive bias where an individual heavily relies on an initial piece of information offered to make subsequent judgments. Michael anchors the conversation to an artificially low assessment of their total estate. Because Sarah lacks the opposing data to challenge this anchor, she might unknowingly agree to a settlement that forfeits millions of dollars of legally recognizable marital assets. She feels a false sense of relief because the conflict ended quickly, but the potential outcomes for her long-term financial survival are catastrophic. Elite mediators are acutely trained to spot this exact dynamic before a single offer is ever exchanged. The moment a professional detects extreme information asymmetry, they will forcefully hit the brakes on the negotiation phase. They utilize a procedural safeguard known as mandatory discovery modeling. The mediator shifts from a facilitator to a strict process manager, explaining that no equitable division can occur until a completely transparent, verified baseline of reality is established. In modern 2026 practice, this often involves bringing in a neutral third-party expert, specifically a certified divorce financial analyst or a forensic accountant. This neutral expert does not work for Michael, and they do not work for Sarah. They work directly for the mediation process itself. By outsourcing the data verification to a neutral entity, the mediator permanently dismantles Michael's information monopoly, collapsing the asymmetry and restoring a mathematically balanced playing field. However, power imbalances are not always purely financial. Often, they are deeply psychological, rooted in years of established behavioral conditioning. We must examine the sociology of coercive emotional dynamics and high-conflict personalities. In some relationships, one partner has systematically conditioned the other to yield to their demands through subtle intimidation, chronic gaslighting, or overwhelming emotional outbursts. When these couples sit across from each other at a mediation table, the physical presence of the dominant spouse can trigger a profound physiological stress response in the subordinate spouse. Social scientists measure this through cortisol spikes and observable physical withdrawal. The subordinate spouse will often agree to terrible, unfair terms simply to escape the paralyzing discomfort of the room. To neutralize this dangerous psychological power imbalance, mediators deploy a highly effective spatial and behavioral intervention known as caucusing or shuttle diplomacy. Instead of forcing the couple to remain in the same room, the mediator physically separates them into different, private spaces. The mediator then shuttles back and forth between the two rooms. This immediately severs the visual and psychological feedback loop. The dominant spouse can no longer use a piercing stare, a subtle sigh, or an aggressive posture to intimidate the other. Furthermore, in the safety of a private caucus room, the mediator can engage in direct reality testing with the vulnerable spouse, asking probing questions to ensure their concessions are driven by genuine strategic compromise, not by deeply ingrained fear. Simultaneously, the mediator uses the private caucus to relentlessly challenge the dominant spouse using a critical negotiation framework called BATNA, which stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The dominant spouse often operates under the delusion that they hold all the leverage. The mediator will sit with them privately and meticulously map out their BATNA. The mediator will ask, "What is your exact alternative if this mediation fails today?" The reality is, the alternative is traditional litigation. The mediator will present historical data demonstrating the staggering financial cost of a multi-year trial, the total loss of privacy as financial records become public court documents, and the statistical probability that a judge may rule entirely against them. By forcing the dominant spouse to logically confront the agonizing reality of their BATNA, the mediator aggressively deflates their artificial sense of superiority, bringing them back to the table with a newfound willingness to genuinely collaborate. Yet, even when information is perfectly symmetrical, and even when power dynamics are meticulously balanced through caucusing and neutral financial experts, the entire mediation process can still violently derail in a matter of seconds. You can have the most perfectly balanced spreadsheet and the most equitable custody proposal sitting right on the table, and one single misplaced word can cause a rational human being to suddenly burn the entire agreement to the ground. Why do highly intelligent, successful adults actively sabotage their own best interests in the final hour of a negotiation? The answer is not sociological, it is purely neurological. To understand why deals inexplicably collapse, we have to look inside the physical structure of the human brain during moments of extreme perceived threat. To understand why deals inexplicably collapse, we have to look inside the physical structure of the human brain during moments of extreme perceived threat. The human brain is an absolute marvel of biological engineering, but it is fundamentally wired for prehistoric survival, not for navigating complex legal negotiations. Deep within the temporal lobe lies a tiny, almond-shaped cluster of nuclei called the amygdala. The amygdala functions as the brain's primary emotional threat detection center. For early humans, this structure was vital. If a predator approached, the amygdala instantly seized control of the nervous system, completely bypassing slower, logical thought processes to initiate an immediate fight or flight response. Millions of years later, our physical environment has radically changed, but our biological hardware remains largely the same. In stark contrast to the primitive amygdala is the prefrontal cortex, situated at the very front of the brain. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of advanced executive function. It is responsible for logical reasoning, mathematical calculation, long-term planning, empathy, and impulse control. Whenever you are engaged in productive, interest-based negotiation, you are heavily utilizing your prefrontal cortex. You are weighing potential outcomes, calculating future financial stability, and making rational compromises. However, there is a severe design flaw in human neurobiology when it comes to dispute resolution. The amygdala operates significantly faster than the prefrontal cortex. When the brain perceives a profound threat, it does not distinguish between a physical attack in the wilderness and a psychological attack at a mediation table. Let us examine how this neurobiological reality manifests in a modern scenario. Imagine if we observe Robert and Lisa, a couple navigating their separation in the year 2026. They have spent the entire morning in a productive mediation session, meticulously and logically dividing their shared marital debts. Their prefrontal cortices are fully engaged. But then the topic shifts to the holiday parenting schedule. Robert casually suggests that he should have the children for Thanksgiving because Lisa's family is, in his words, far too chaotic to provide a stable environment for the holiday. To Robert, this is merely a passing observation. To Lisa's brain, it is an existential threat. It is a direct assault on her identity as a mother, an attack on her family lineage, and a terrifying threat to her future relationship with her children. In a fraction of a second, Lisa's amygdala detects this massive psychological danger and sounds the alarm. It triggers an immediate, overwhelming flood of stress hormones, specifically adrenaline and cortisol, straight into her bloodstream. This neurochemical cascade causes a phenomenon known in social psychology and behavioral science as an amygdala hijack. During an amygdala hijack, blood flow and metabolic energy are literally diverted away from the prefrontal cortex and redirected toward the extremities in preparation for physical combat. Lisa's logical brain effectively powers down. Her pupils dilate, her heart rate spikes, her breathing becomes shallow, and her cognitive flexibility drops to absolute zero. She is no longer capable of understanding historical trends in custody arrangements or rationalizing potential outcomes. She cannot hear logic. She is biologically locked in a state of absolute defense. She violently rejects all previous agreements made that morning, accuses Robert of attempting to steal her children, and threatens to walk out of the room and immediately file a devastating lawsuit. If this exact scenario occurred in a traditional adversarial environment between two opposing attorneys, it would instantly trigger a counter-hijack. Robert would feel attacked, his amygdala would fire, and the attorneys would immediately start drafting aggressive legal motions, capitalizing on the chaos to bill more hours. The conflict would escalate exponentially, utterly destroying the family's financial resources. However, an elite professional mediator observes this interaction through a strictly scientific lens. They do not view Lisa's outburst as a legal failure or a character flaw. They recognize it exactly for what it is, a temporary neurobiological state. The mediator understands the cardinal rule of high conflict resolution. You cannot use logic to defeat a biological stress response. If the mediator attempts to calmly explain the mathematical fairness of the holiday schedule, while Lisa is flooded with cortisol, those words will simply bounce off her deactivated prefrontal cortex. It is completely futile. Instead, the professional mediator immediately pivots to biological management. The first step is executing a tactical pause. The mediator will abruptly halt the negotiation, separate the parties, and mandate a hard break. This is not just to let tempers cool. It is a mathematically necessary biological intervention. Scientific data shows that it takes the human body approximately 20 to 30 minutes to physically metabolize and flush a sudden surge of adrenaline and cortisol out of the bloodstream. Until that biological clock runs out, no further legal progress is physically possible. Once the physiological markers of stress begin to subside in the private caucus room, the mediator must then rebuild the neural pathway back to the prefrontal cortex. They do this through a highly specific linguistic technique known as cognitive reframing. Rather than telling Lisa to calm down, which historically only triggers further aggression, the mediator asks complex, future-oriented, open-ended questions. They might ask Lisa to describe the specific values she wants her children to experience during the holidays in the year 2028. Answering a complex, chronological, and value-based question physically forces the brain to shunt blood flow back into the prefrontal cortex. By forcing the brain to calculate the future rather than react to the past, the mediator systematically reboots the client's logical hardware. Only when the mediator has successfully guided both parties back into their prefrontal cortices can the negotiation resume. This intricate dance of managing neurochemistry is the invisible safety net of mediation. It is the crucial psychological boundary that prevents families from destroying themselves over a single, emotionally charged misunderstanding. It is a brilliant, highly effective application of neuroscience that traditional courtrooms actively ignore. But what happens when the biological threats are neutralized, the emotional baseline is restored, and the couple finally turns their logical minds toward the single most complicated, terrifying, and highest-stakes phase of any modern dissolution? We have stabilized the human element, but now we must confront the mechanical reality of wealth. As we dive into the deep mechanics of asset division, we are no longer just looking at simple bank accounts and physical real estate. In the incredibly complex financial ecosystem of the current decade, couples are heavily entangled in decentralized digital assets, fractionalized equity, entirely invisible streams of passive income, and highly volatile intellectual property. If you do not understand exactly how modern social science and forensic mediation meticulously dissect and distribute these hidden modern assets, you risk walking away from the table leaving millions of dollars completely unaccounted for. The modern definition of marital wealth has fundamentally transformed over the past 2 decades, entirely rewriting the rules of dispute resolution. We are no longer operating in an era where the sole financial pillars of a marriage are a physical brick-and-mortar residence, a standard savings account, and a predictable corporate pension. Historical trends show that the legal system was originally built to divide tangible, easily appraised items that sit neatly on a physical ledger. But in the current year 2026, the United States economy has aggressively shifted toward intangible, digital, and highly speculative value. Imagine if we analyze the complex financial reality of Thomas and Rachel, a high-achieving couple residing in Austin, Texas. Over their 12-year marriage, their wealth accumulation strategy became incredibly sophisticated. Thomas is a senior software engineer at an emerging artificial intelligence startup. A massive portion of his total compensation is not paid in a traditional biweekly salary, but rather in unvested restricted stock units, known as RSUs, and decentralized cryptocurrency performance bonuses. Rachel, on the other hand, is the sole founder of a highly profitable direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand. Her business holds very little physical inventory, but it possesses massive digital value through its proprietary customer data lists, recurring subscription revenue models, and carefully cultivated brand intellectual property. If Thomas and Rachel attempt to divide these modern assets in a traditional family court, the potential outcomes are often disastrous. Judges are brilliant legal scholars, but they are rarely forensic technology valuation experts or venture capitalists. The traditional court system applies outdated sociological frameworks to modern economic realities, frequently resulting in arbitrary rulings that completely destroy the underlying value of the assets in question. A traditional judge might force the immediate liquidation of Thomas's cryptocurrency portfolio during a severe market dip to satisfy a cash payout, locking in a permanent, catastrophic financial loss. Or the court might mandate that Rachel sell off a percentage of her proprietary business data to buy out Thomas's legally recognized marital interest, an action that could effectively cripple her company's future operational capacity and destroy her primary source of income. This is precisely where the advanced architecture of modern divorce mediation steps in to preserve the economic foundation of the family unit. Elite mediators understand that modern asset division is not just basic arithmetic. It is a complex sociological negotiation involving risk tolerance, future earning potential, tax liabilities, and personal identity. In our case study, a highly skilled mediator will immediately recognize that Thomas and Rachel's complex assets cannot simply be liquidated and cut down the middle without causing mutual financial ruin. Let us look specifically at the intricate nature of the unvested restricted stock units held by Thomas. These are shares of company stock that Thomas does not actually own yet. They will only vest and become valuable if he remains continuously employed with his startup for another 3 years. From a sociological and legal perspective, this presents a massive hurdle. How do you equitably divide capital that does not currently exist and fundamentally requires the future, post-divorce labor of only one spouse? In advanced mediation, professionals utilize sophisticated financial modeling instead of blunt judicial force. They often collaborate with a certified divorce financial analyst to apply a specific mathematical equation known as the coverture fraction. This specific formula meticulously calculates the exact ratio of the time Thomas worked for the startup during the marriage, compared to the total time required for the stock to fully vest. Instead of blindly guessing the future value of the tech company or fighting over hypothetical millions in a courtroom, the mediator helps Thomas and Rachel construct a highly customized, legally binding separation agreement. This agreement automatically applies the fractional calculation to the stock, only if and exactly when it actually vests in the future. This deferred distribution model perfectly aligns their underlying interests. It legally protects Rachel's historical contribution to the marital estate, while fully preserving Thomas's personal incentive to continue working hard for his company, knowing his future labor is not being unfairly taxed by his past marriage. Furthermore, mediation directly addresses the terrifying reality of capital gains taxes, a factor often completely ignored by emotional couples in traditional litigation. When RSUs vest, they are treated as ordinary income. A skilled mediator ensures that the tax burden is mathematically modeled into the settlement, preventing a scenario where Thomas hands over half the stock, but is legally left paying 100% of the massive tax liability. Now, let us examine the sociological approach to Rachel's e-commerce empire. In a traditional litigation environment, Thomas might be advised by his attorney to hire an aggressive forensic accountant. This accountant would be paid to place an artificially massive, inflated valuation on her business, demanding an immediate cash payout that would inevitably force Rachel into bankruptcy or massive debt. In mediation, the behavioral economics completely shift. The mediator actively explores the psychological reality that Rachel's business is deeply tied to her personal identity, her daily routine, and her long-term psychological survival. Thomas, conversely, likely views her business merely as a line item on a spreadsheet, holding no emotional attachment to its daily operations. Using the interest-based negotiation framework we discussed previously, the mediator introduces the powerful concept of a strategic asset offset. The mediator brings in a single neutral valuation expert to determine a realistic, fair market value of the company's intangible intellectual property. Once that baseline number is established, instead of disrupting the business, they look at the macro view of the entire marital estate. Through guided negotiation, Thomas might agree to completely waive any future legal claim to Rachel's company. In direct exchange, Rachel permanently signs over her legal equity claim to their primary physical residence and the entirety of Thomas's volatile cryptocurrency portfolio. Speaking of cryptocurrency, dividing decentralized assets in the year 2026 presents a unique sociological and technological nightmare. Because these assets are highly volatile and exist on heavily encrypted blockchain ledgers, the potential for one spouse to successfully hide millions of dollars is incredibly high. Traditional courts are notoriously slow and often fail completely to track these rapid digital movements. However, modern mediation frequently integrates specialized digital forensic analysts directly into the confidential negotiation room. These experts utilize sophisticated blockchain tracing software to map out every single digital transaction and wallet transfer, ensuring absolute financial transparency before any settlement is reached. Furthermore, because cryptocurrency can drop 30% in value between a morning mediation session and an afternoon signing, mediators use percentage-based division language rather than fixed fiat dollar amounts, protecting both parties from sudden, catastrophic market volatility. The profound, empirically proven advantage of mediation is that it allows human beings to distribute their assets based on their actual, subjective value and personal risk tolerance, rather than rigid, arbitrary state laws. Sociological case studies repeatedly demonstrate that individuals do not value all assets equally. Thomas might have an incredibly high risk tolerance and strongly prefer holding volatile tech stock and decentralized crypto, truly believing in their exponential future growth. Rachel might possess a much lower risk tolerance, preferring the absolute, tangible stability of physical real estate and a guaranteed, predictable cash offset. Mediation is the sole structural dispute resolution process that allows them to customize their financial dissolution to perfectly match these deeply ingrained psychological risk profiles. By doing so, both parties leave the table feeling mathematically satisfied and psychologically secure. But dividing wealth, no matter how complex the financial ecosystem, is still fundamentally a transaction based on logic, data, and mathematical modeling. It is arguably the easiest phase of the process compared to what comes next. What happens when the asset sitting in the middle of the negotiation table is not a stock portfolio, a blockchain wallet, or a piece of real estate? What happens when you must mathematically divide the developmental future, the psychological stability, and the physical presence of a living, breathing human child? The sociology of modern co-parenting and the psychological battlefield of child custody mediation is an entirely different universe of human conflict, and the deeply hidden systemic biases that heavily influence these decisions will completely shatter your understanding of the family law system. The transition from dividing financial capital to dividing parental time represents the most significant psychological shift in the entire mediation process. In the social sciences, this is known as moving from tangible asset allocation to the management of human developmental outcomes. While a bank account can be split down to the last cent with mathematical precision, the time and influence a parent has over a child is a finite, non-renewable resource that carries immense emotional weight. In the traditional United States legal system, child custody was historically governed by the tender years doctrine, a sociological vestige that presumed young children were better off with their mothers. However, as we move through 2026, historical trends show a massive legislative and cultural pivot toward the presumption of 50-50 joint physical and legal custody. This shift, while grounded in the ideal of equality, often creates a new set of logistical and psychological stressors that only mediation is equipped to solve. To understand the complexity of modern parenting plans, we must examine a case study involving Kevin and Maria, a couple living in suburban Georgia. They have 2 children, ages 8 and 11. In a traditional litigation scenario, Kevin and Maria would be forced to label their arrangement using rigid legal terms: sole custody, joint custody, or primary physical custody. These labels are inherently adversarial. They suggest a hierarchy where one parent is the leader and the other is a mere visitor. Social science research indicates that when parents are labeled as visitors, their long-term engagement with their children statistically declines. In mediation, a professional ignores these binary labels and instead focuses on the functional reality of the family. The mediator introduces a sophisticated sociological tool known as the Comprehensive Parenting Plan. This document is not a one-page court order. It is a meticulously detailed, 40-page operational manual for the children's lives. Imagine if Kevin and Maria were forced by a judge to follow a standard alternating weekend schedule. This rigid framework ignores the fact that their 11-year-old is a competitive swimmer with practice every Tuesday at 5 a.m., or that Maria travels for work on the 3rd week of every month. A court order is a blunt instrument that often shatters the existing rhythm of a child's life. A mediator, acting as a developmental facilitator, helps Kevin and Maria build a schedule around the child, not the parents. They utilize a concept called child-centered scheduling. They look at the 2026 school calendar, the extracurricular demands, and the psychological temperament of each child. For instance, if the 8-year-old struggles with transitions, a 2-2-3 schedule, where the child moves 3 times a week, might be developmentally harmful. The mediator would present longitudinal data showing that for high transition-sensitive children, a week-on, week-off schedule provides the necessary stability to maintain academic focus and emotional regulation. Beyond the physical schedule, the mediation process deep dives into the sociology of joint legal custody, which involves decision-making power over the big 3: education, healthcare, and religious upbringing. In 2026, this has expanded to include a 4th pillar: digital footprint management. This is a massive point of conflict for modern American parents. Imagine if Kevin wants the children to have unrestricted access to social media and virtual reality platforms, while Maria believes in a strict, tech-free environment until age 16. In a courtroom, a judge might grant one parent final decision-making authority, effectively silencing the other and creating a permanent power imbalance. In mediation, the professional guides them toward a behavioral contract. They might agree to a phased digital introduction, where the children receive devices only upon reaching certain developmental milestones, with shared monitoring software accessible to both parents. This collaborative approach solves the immediate problem while simultaneously teaching Kevin and Maria how to negotiate future conflicts without a lawyer. They are practicing the specific communication skills required for successful co-parenting in a post-divorce landscape. However, the most profound sociological benefit of custody mediation is the mitigation of parental alienation and loyalty conflicts. When parents fight in court, children often experience what social psychologists call a split loyalty bind. They feel that loving one parent is a betrayal of the other. Historical trends in high-conflict litigation show that children caught in these binds suffer from significantly higher rates of depression, academic failure, and substance abuse in early adulthood. Mediation acts as a protective barrier. By keeping the conflict behind the closed doors of a private office and away from the public record of a courtroom, parents prevent their children from becoming pawns in a legal strategy. We must also address the economics of co-parenting. In the United States, child support is typically calculated using a rigid state-mandated formula based on gross income and the number of overnights. But these formulas often fail to account for the actual variable costs of raising a child in a high-inflation, high-tech economy. A mediator facilitates a deep-dive analysis of the children's direct expenses, specialized tutoring, health insurance premiums, summer camps, and even future car insurance for teenagers. Instead of a single monthly check that becomes a source of resentment, a mediated agreement might create a joint expense account, funded proportionally to income, with clear rules on what constitutes a necessary expense. This transparency removes the primary trigger for post-divorce financial conflict. But even with a perfect parenting plan and a balanced budget, there is a hidden variable that can undermine everything. This is the concept of the third-party influence. In the sociology of divorce, we have to look at what happens when a new romantic partner enters the scene. This is often the single most explosive trigger in any co-parenting relationship. How do you regulate when a child meets a new partner? How do you handle the introduction of a step-parent into the carefully balanced decision-making process we just built? If you do not proactively address the introduction of new partners during the initial mediation, you are essentially leaving a ticking time bomb in the middle of your parenting plan. Most people think they can just figure it out when the time comes, but the data suggests that without a pre-negotiated behavioral framework, the arrival of a new partner is the leading cause of mediated agreements collapsing within the first 24 months. The sociological strategies used to future-proof a parenting plan against this inevitable change are highly controversial and require a level of foresight that most people simply don't have during the initial shock of a separation. We are about to look at the specific, legally binding clauses that successful mediators use to manage the introduction of third parties, and why failing to include these can lead to a complete systemic breakdown of the family unit. To prevent the systemic breakdown of the family unit, when new social variables are introduced, modern mediators rely on a sociological framework known as future-proofing the parenting plan. This involves the integration of specific, legally binding behavioral protocols that address the inevitable transition from a nuclear family to a blended family. In the United States, historical trends indicate that a significant majority of divorced individuals will enter a new committed relationship within 3 to 5 years of their dissolution. When this happens without a pre-negotiated roadmap, it often triggers a psychological phenomenon in the original co-parent, known as replacement anxiety. This is the irrational but powerful fear that a new step-parent will usurp their role, title, and emotional connection with the child. Imagine if we analyze a case study involving Christopher and Amanda, a couple from North Carolina who finalized their mediation in early 2026. During their sessions, the mediator introduced a morality and introduction clause. This is not about policing the private lives of the adults, but about protecting the psychological stability of the children. Amanda, a high school teacher with a deep understanding of adolescent development, and Christopher, a corporate executive, agreed to a 6-month rule. This protocol stipulates that neither parent will introduce a new romantic partner to the children until the relationship has been exclusive and consistent for a minimum of 6 months. From a social science perspective, this delay is critical for the child's mourning process. Children of divorce are often in a state of prolonged grief as they adjust to the loss of the original family structure. Introducing a new figure too early can cause a cognitive dissonance that leads to behavioral outbursts or emotional withdrawal. By the time 2026 rolled around and Christopher began dating again, the existence of this clause prevented a sudden, impulsive introduction that could have shattered the fragile peace he had established with Amanda. The clause acts as a cooling-off period, ensuring that only stable, long-term figures are integrated into the child's ecosystem. Furthermore, advanced mediation utilizes the right of first refusal clause. This is a logistical masterpiece in family sociology. It states that if a parent is scheduled to have the children but becomes unavailable due to work, travel, or an emergency for more than a specific duration, typically 4 to 8 hours, they must first offer that time to the other biological parent before calling a babysitter or a new partner. This clause reinforces the biological bond and prevents the children from being handed off to strangers or new significant others, while a willing, capable parent is available. Case studies show that the right of first refusal significantly lowers the friction caused by the presence of third parties, because it prioritizes the co-parenting relationship over external convenience. Beyond the logistics of introductions, we must address the complex financial sociology of the blended family. In 2026, the cost of living and the complexity of multi-household management have made child support modifications a frequent source of secondary litigation. If Christopher marries someone who earns a significantly higher income, does that change his obligation to Amanda? Traditional court systems often struggle with this, but mediation allows for the creation of a future equity framework. This involves pre-negotiating how future changes in household income or the birth of half-siblings will be handled mathematically. By establishing these parameters during the initial period of relative cooperation, the couple prevents the need for a hostile return to court years later. However, even the most robust parenting plan is useless if it cannot be enforced without the intervention of an expensive attorney. This brings us to a critical development in modern dispute resolution: the permanent mediation requirement. High-quality mediated agreements in the United States now frequently include a clause that mandates the parties return to mediation for at least 2 sessions before they are legally allowed to file a motion in court for any non-emergency issue. This is a systemic safeguard. It forces the parents back into a collaborative environment where a professional can help them de-escalate the new conflict before it reaches the point of total legal warfare. But as we look toward the final stages of a deep dive into divorce mediation, we have to confront a difficult reality. We have talked about the successes, the psychological tools, and the financial strategies, but there is a darker side to the industry that many people ignore. In the social sciences, this is known as the industry of the impasse. There is a specific segment of the population for whom mediation will never work, no matter how skilled the professional or how balanced the power. If you are dealing with a personality type that social scientists label as a high-conflict personality, or HCP, the very tools of mediation can be weaponized against you. A high-conflict personality does not seek a resolution. They seek a platform for continued combat. They use the confidentiality of mediation to hide assets, the collaborative nature to stall for time, and the emotional openness to inflict further psychological trauma. In these scenarios, the standard advice of seeking peace can actually become a dangerous form of victim blaming. How do you distinguish between a difficult but well-meaning spouse and a true high-conflict personality before you spend thousands of dollars on a failing mediation process? The social science data on identifying these patterns is incredibly precise, but most people are too close to the situation to see the red flags. We are going to look at the exact linguistic markers, the behavioral patterns, and the strategic maneuvers that HCPs use to hijack the mediation process. If you find yourself in a room with one of these individuals, the rules of interest-based negotiation no longer apply. You have to pivot to a completely different, highly defensive strategy, known as parallel parenting and high-structure containment. This transition is jarring for many because it goes against the grain of the collaborative spirit we have discussed so far. But in the reality of 2026, being prepared for the worst-case scenario is the only way to protect your best-case outcome. We are entering the realm of the failed mediation, the specific conditions under which you must walk away from the table, and the sociological reasons why sometimes the adversarial court system is the only remaining mechanism for safety and justice. This is the pivot from cooperation to protection, and understanding when to make that move is arguably the most important skill in the entire masterclass. What are the 3 non-negotiable signals that your mediation is being sabotaged from within, and how do you execute a strategic exit without losing your legal leverage? To identify the 3 non-negotiable signals of mediation sabotage, we must look at the behavioral patterns that social scientists categorize as bad faith negotiation. While mediation is built on the foundation of transparency and mutual compromise, an individual with a high conflict personality often views these very virtues as exploitable weaknesses. In the social science of conflict, this is referred to as the exploitation of the cooperative norm. The first and most dangerous signal of sabotage is a persistent pattern of information withholding or strategic obfuscation. In 2026, where digital trails are extensive, there is no logical reason for a spouse to be unable to produce clear financial records unless they are intentionally creating a fog of war. Imagine if we look at the case study of Brian and Elizabeth from Denver, Colorado. They entered mediation with the stated goal of an equitable split. However, every time the mediator requested the previous 3 years of tax returns or the login data for their joint brokerage account, Brian would provide incomplete PDFs, claim he forgot the passwords, or insist that the data was being held up by an external accountant who was conveniently on vacation. This is not a clerical error. It is a tactical maneuver known as stonewalling. By controlling the flow of information, Brian was attempting to exhaust Elizabeth's emotional and financial resources, hoping she would eventually settle for a lower, unverified number just to end the process. When the production of basic, verifiable data becomes a multi-month struggle, the sociological foundation of mediation has effectively collapsed. The second non-negotiable signal of internal sabotage is the presence of shifting goalposts. In a healthy mediation, the parties move toward a narrow set of remaining issues. However, a high-conflict personality will often agree to a term 1 week, and then unilaterally retract that agreement the following week, introducing entirely new, unrelated demands. This is a behavioral strategy designed to keep the other party in a state of perpetual psychological instability. In social psychology, this is known as intermittent reinforcement of conflict. The saboteur provides just enough progress to keep you at the table, then violently pulls it away to assert dominance. Consider a scenario where a spouse agrees to a specific housing buyout figure during a Tuesday session. By Friday, they send an email claiming they never agreed to that number, and now demand a percentage of a future inheritance that hasn't even occurred yet. This behavior is a clear indicator that the individual is not negotiating to reach a resolution. They are negotiating to maintain control over the other person's life. If you find yourself repeatedly solving the same problem only for it to be resurrected with new complications, you are no longer in a mediation. You are in a cycle of psychological abuse masquerading as a legal process. The third and final signal is the weaponization of the children to gain financial leverage. While we have discussed the ideal of child-centered scheduling, high-conflict individuals often use parenting time as a bargaining chip for asset division. They might say, "I will give you the 50-50th custody you want, but only if you waive your right to the equity in the family home." In the social sciences, this is a profound red flag indicating a complete lack of empathy and a disregard for the child's developmental needs. Using a child's relationship with a parent as a commercial asset is a fundamental violation of the mediation's ethical framework. If your spouse makes the children's well-being contingent on a financial payout, the collaborative spirit is dead, and the safety of the children now requires a more structured judicial intervention. Once these signals are identified, you must execute what social scientists call a strategic exit. This is not a retreat. It is a pivot to a different form of conflict management. Most people make the mistake of making a grand emotional exit, accusing their spouse of being a liar or a narcissist in front of the mediator. This is counterproductive because it provides the high-conflict individual with the exact emotional reaction they crave. Instead, a strategic exit should be clinical, documented, and silent. You simply state to the mediator that the current process is no longer productive due to a lack of shared information, and that you are suspending the sessions to pursue other legal avenues. This preserves your legal leverage because you haven't revealed your next move. You have simply stopped participating in a failed experiment. Following a failed mediation, the next step in the social science of high-conflict divorce is the move toward high-structure containment. Since the cooperative model failed, you must move to a model based on rigid, enforceable rules. This often involves the use of a parenting coordinator or a special master. These are court-appointed professionals who have the authority to make binding decisions on the spot when parents cannot agree. Unlike a mediator, who facilitates a conversation, a parenting coordinator acts as a referee. This shift is essential because it removes the opportunity for the high-conflict personality to engage in shifting goalposts or stonewalling. If they refuse to provide information, the coordinator simply makes a ruling based on the available data, and that ruling carries the weight of a court order. Furthermore, for families in this high-conflict category, the sociological goal shifts from co-parenting to parallel parenting. While co-parenting requires high levels of communication and flexibility, parallel parenting is a model where the two parents have almost zero direct contact. They utilize parenting apps for all communication, which creates a permanent, admissible record of every interaction. They have strictly defined exchange locations, often in public or neutral spaces, to prevent verbal altercations. The parenting plan becomes an incredibly dense, rigid document that accounts for every possible minute of the child's life, leaving no room for the interpretation or manipulation that a saboteur relies on. However, as we move into 2026, there is a new emerging technological factor that is fundamentally changing how we handle these high-conflict exits. Artificial intelligence is now being integrated into mediation and legal platforms to detect these patterns of sabotage in real time. Sentiment analysis algorithms can now scan months of communication between spouses to identify the linguistic markers of coercive control or gaslighting before a mediator even sees the parties. This data-driven approach is providing a new level of objective evidence for individuals who feel they are being undermined in secret. But this technological revolution brings us to a final, profound question that every American facing divorce in this decade must answer. We have explored the psychology, the economics, the neurobiology, and the sociological frameworks of mediation and its failures. But what is the long-term impact of these choices on the social fabric of the United States? As mediation becomes the standard and litigation becomes the exception, are we actually creating a more peaceful society? Or are we simply privatizing conflict and hiding systemic injustices behind the veil of confidentiality? The answer lies in the massive longitudinal datasets being collected right now, and the results are not what you might expect. We are about to look at the macro-level impact of the mediation revolution on the American economy and the future of the American family unit. the hidden cost of peace might be higher than we ever imagined. To examine the macro-level impact of the mediation revolution, we must look at the shifting economic landscape of the United States in 2026. For decades, the divorce industry was a massive pillar of the American legal economy, generating billions of dollars in revenue through protracted litigation, expert witness fees, and court costs. However, as mediation has moved from a fringe alternative to the primary method of marital dissolution, we are witnessing a profound sociological phenomenon known as the privatization of family conflict. This shift has massive implications for the American middle class, particularly regarding the preservation of intergenerational wealth. Historical trends indicate that the traditional adversarial system acted as a significant drain on family assets, often consuming up to 30% of a middle-class family's net worth in legal fees alone. By shifting toward mediation, that capital is now remaining within the family unit. In social science terms, this is a massive redistribution of wealth from the legal professional class back to the family structure. Imagine if a couple like Marcus and Elena, living in a high-cost area like Northern Virginia, decide to dissolve their marriage in 2026. By choosing a high-depth mediation process over a 2-year court battle, they effectively save $200,000 in aggregate costs. That capital is not just sitting in a bank. It is reinvested into their children's education, their own retirement accounts, and the local economy. On a national scale, when multiplied by hundreds of thousands of cases, this represents a multi-billion-dollar shift in how capital is preserved during life transitions. However, this privatization of conflict introduces a complex sociological trade-off: the loss of public oversight and the erosion of legal precedent. When a judge makes a ruling in an open courtroom, that decision becomes part of the public record. It contributes to a body of law that provides predictability and standards for society. Mediation, by contrast, is strictly confidential. The settlements reached behind closed doors are not indexed, not searchable, and not subject to public scrutiny. Social scientists are beginning to raise concerns that this lack of transparency may be masking systemic inequalities. If women in a certain demographic are consistently settling for less than their legal entitlement in mediation because of social pressure or a desire for peace, we have no aggregate data to track that trend. We are essentially trading public justice for private efficiency. Let us look at a case study that highlights this tension. In the current year 2026, we are seeing a rise in what sociologists call the gray divorce mediation. This involves couples over the age of 60 who are dissolving long-term marriages. For this demographic, the primary asset is often a complex web of Social Security benefits, survivor annuities, and long-term care insurance policies. In a public courtroom, a judge is bound by strict statutory protections designed to prevent an elderly spouse from falling into poverty. In a private mediation, if one spouse is more cognitively agile or emotionally dominant, they might negotiate a settlement that leaves the other spouse with insufficient long-term healthcare coverage. Because there is no judge to review the fairness of the deal, the vulnerable spouse may become a ward of the state 5 years later. This is the hidden cost of peace. The efficiency of the private deal can sometimes bypass the safety nets built into the public system. Furthermore, we must address the impact of the mediation revolution on the psychology of the American workforce. Human resource data from 2026 suggests that employees going through a mediated divorce have significantly lower rates of absenteeism and higher productivity levels compared to those in active litigation. Litigation creates a state of chronic, high-intensity stress that social scientists call cognitive load. When an employee is constantly checking their phone for emails from their lawyer or worrying about a surprise court appearance, their executive function is compromised. Mediation, being a more predictable and time-bound process, allows for better compartmentalization. For the U.S. economy, this translates to thousands of hours of preserved human capital. But as we delve deeper into the 2026 landscape, we see a new technological layer being added to this sociological shift: the rise of the algorithm-assisted mediator. Large language models and predictive analytics are now being used to suggest settlement ranges based on thousands of similar cases. While this increases efficiency, it also introduces a new risk known as algorithmic bias. If the data used to train these models reflects historical gender or racial biases in asset division, the AI might suggest settlements that perpetuate those same inequalities under the guise of objective data. Imagine if Marcus and Elena are using a mediation platform that utilizes an AI assistant. The AI suggests a parenting schedule based on the average habits of families in their zip code. If that zip code historically favors traditional gender roles, The AI might subtly nudge Marcus toward a visitor role and Elena toward a primary caregiver role. Even if both parents initially wanted a 50-50 split, the couple might agree to the suggestion simply because it feels data-driven and neutral, not realizing they have been nudged back into a sociological mold they intended to break. This leads us to the final, most critical component of our deep dive. We have examined the mechanics, the psychology, the economics, and the macro-level shifts. But the ultimate metric of success for divorce mediation is not found in the Memorandum of Understanding or the balance sheet. It is found in the long-term developmental outcomes of the children who grow up in the shadow of these agreements. We are currently witnessing the first generation of Americans who have reached adulthood having been raised under the structured, interest-based co-parenting plans we have discussed throughout this masterclass. The social science data coming out in 2026 regarding this cohort is nothing short of revolutionary. It is challenging every historical assumption we had about the impact of divorce on child development. We are seeing a divergence in outcomes so stark that it is creating a new form of social stratification. On one side, we have children from high conflict, litigated divorces who show markers of chronic stress and relational instability. On the other, we have children from mediated, collaborative divorces who are showing levels of emotional intelligence and conflict resolution skills that often exceed those of children from intact, but high-tension marriages. Why is this happening? Why is the act of a healthy divorce sometimes more developmentally beneficial than an unhealthy marriage? The answer lies in a concept called modeled conflict resolution, and it is the single most important lesson any parent can take away from this entire deep dive. But to understand how this works, we have to look at the final, missing piece of the mediation puzzle, the post-mediation integration. Most people think the work is done when the papers are signed. In reality, the most difficult and most important part of the entire social science of mediation is just beginning. What happens in the first 90 days after the agreement is finalized determines whether the family unit actually stabilizes, or if it enters a terminal descent. We are about to look at the 3 specific behavioral habits that distinguish the families that thrive from the families that collapse, and the final revelation about what a successful divorce actually looks like in the modern age. The first 90 days following the signing of a mediated settlement agreement are sociologically recognized as the stabilization window. During this period, the theoretical frameworks negotiated in a boardroom are stress-tested by the friction of daily life. In the social sciences, this transition is described as the move from structural reorganization to behavioral integration. The family unit is no longer a single household, it has become a binuclear system. For this system to function without collapsing back into high-conflict litigation, 3 specific behavioral habits must be established with absolute consistency. The first habit is the rigorous adherence to low-conflict communication protocols. In 2026, the primary point of failure for post-mediation families is not the large-scale legal issues, but the microaggressions facilitated by instant digital communication. To mitigate this, successful families utilize a method known as the BIF response, which stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Imagine if a father named Stephen receives a hostile, rambling text from his co-parent, Laura, regarding a change in the pickup time for their daughter. In an unstabilized system, Stephen might respond with a defensive, emotional retort, triggering a 3-day digital war. In a thriving stabilized system, Stephen utilizes the BIF protocol. He ignores the insults, provides the necessary logistical information in 2 sentences, maintains a polite tone, and firmly closes the conversation. This habit effectively starves the conflict of the emotional oxygen it needs to survive, teaching the high-conflict brain that digital outbursts will not yield a psychological payoff. The second behavioral habit is the implementation of a neutral transition ritual. Social science data indicates that the moment of exchange, when a child moves from one parent to the other, is the period of highest psychological vulnerability for the child. This is when the reality of the divorce is most tangible. Families that thrive in 2026 often utilize a curbside or neutral site exchange strategy that minimizes direct parent-to-parent contact during the transition. By removing the opportunity for verbal conflict or even nonverbal tension like a heavy sigh or a rolling of the eyes, the parents provide the child with a safe emotional container. They are effectively signaling to the child that it is safe to move from one world to the other without having to manage the emotions of the adults. Historical trends in child development show that these small, consistent acts of emotional boundary setting are more predictive of long-term adolescent stability than the actual amount of time spent with each parent. The third and perhaps most vital habit is the firewalling of the child's social and academic life from the parents' personal disputes. In the social science of successful dissolution, this is known as the compartmentalization of the parental role. Thriving parents establish a habit where the school, the pediatrician, and the extracurricular coaches are shielded from the divorce. Both parents attend games and recitals, but they sit in separate areas and focus entirely on the child's performance. They do not use the school as a battlefield for grievances. This behavioral habit allows the child to maintain a sense of normalcy in their external world, preventing the divorce from becoming their entire identity. Now, we must address the final revelation of what a successful divorce actually looks like in the modern age. For decades, the cultural narrative in the United States defined a successful divorce as one where the parties were friends, or perhaps one where they never spoke again. Social science in 2026 offers a much more nuanced and realistic definition. A successful divorce is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of an effective conflict management system. It is a state where the individuals have successfully decoupled their romantic history from their co-parenting future. Consider a longitudinal case study following a family through 5 years of post-mediation life. The parents, Mark and Sarah, do not spend holidays together. They do not consider each other friends. However, they have a 100% compliance rate with their financial obligations. They communicate exclusively through a shared digital calendar. When their son faced a significant academic challenge in middle school, they were able to sit in a room for 60 minutes, set aside their personal history, and develop a unified tutoring plan. This is the gold standard of modern social science outcomes. It is a business-like, professional partnership dedicated to the development of a shared human asset. The potential outcomes for children raised in this environment are profound. We are seeing data that suggests these children develop a higher-than-average capacity for negotiation, empathy, and emotional regulation. Because they have witnessed their parents manage a massive life crisis through structured, interest-based negotiation rather than destructive combat, they internalize those skills. They learn that conflict is not an end state, but a problem to be solved. In this way, a properly managed mediation does not just end a marriage. It provides a masterclass in human relations for the next generation. However, as we conclude this deep dive, we must acknowledge that the landscape of American family law is never static. We are on the precipice of a new era where the definitions of family, wealth, and legal personhood are being challenged by rapid technological and social shifts. While mediation has solved many of the problems of the 20th century adversarial system, it is already facing new challenges. We are seeing the emergence of decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, being used to manage family trusts, and the rise of virtual reality parenting time for geographically distant families. These new variables are creating a landscape where even the most advanced mediation techniques of 2026 may soon be considered legacy systems. The sociological impact of these digital-first family structures is the next great frontier in social science research. How do we mediate a dispute when the primary marital asset is a virtual estate in a decentralized metaverse? How do we protect a child's psychological well-being when their primary interaction with a parent occurs through a high-fidelity haptic interface? The transition from the physical to the digital, from the public to the private, and from the adversarial to the collaborative is not just a trend. It is a fundamental restructuring of how we relate to one another as human beings. The mastery of these dispute resolution frameworks is no longer an optional skill for those facing divorce. It is a foundational requirement for navigating the complexities of modern life. We have deconstructed the mechanics of the amygdala, the economics of the stock vesting schedule, and the behavioral habits of the thriving family. But as the ink dries on the memorandum of understanding, and the court enters the final decree, a new set of questions is already beginning to emerge. The end of the legal process is merely the prologue to a much larger sociological experiment. What happens when the tools we have discussed today are applied not just to divorce, but to the dissolution of corporate partnerships, international treaties, and the very social contracts that hold our communities together? The mediation revolution is spreading far beyond the family court, and its next target is the heart of the American corporate and political structure. We are entering an era of radical transparency and mandated collaboration that will redefine power in the 21st century. The same psychological triggers that allow a couple to settle a mortgage dispute are now being used to settle global resource conflicts. And the data suggests that the results could change the course of human history.